Friends, first of all, I would like to thank the Church of South India and especially, the Department of, the ecological concerns and Professor Dr. Matthew Koshi. His leadership and the leadership of the Church of South India is a very significant one when you look at all over the world, because you are a church which is doing tremendous work. And also the UTC, this program is along with UTC. And we have, the Union Theological College is a very important ecumenical theological institute, and both of them have come together. So this series of lectures and training programs are very, very vital. Now, I would like to give you a little bit overview on this life and living planet, because human beings, we take everything for granted. And now when you look at this in this picture, you see this beautiful picture. It's called the Earthrise. It was in December 24th, 1968 that the photo was taken by an astronaut flying on the Apollo 8. And it was a phenomenal, it was the first time that it was happening, that somebody could take a picture from around 1,360 kilometers above the Earth. They were circling the moon, and the Earth rose from the moon. So it was Earthrise. So in a way, it was an amazing sight of this Earth coming over the moon. And it was in the 24th of December, and they had a live broadcast where they celebrated Christmas by reading the first chapter of Genesis. And it's very important. It's very important for us to understand this very fragile planet that we live in is a very unique planet, the only planet that we know that has life. But God has created the whole universe. And of course, God has bestowed life into this planet. And we know from Psalm 104 that God causes everything to happen, creation, everything. And also it is very clear that the Bible teaches us that the earth was not just created for human beings, but it was created for all creatures. All creatures. And it is in chapter 9 of Genesis, it is very clear when they talk about it in the covenant that God had with Noah was not just with humanity, but it was a covenant with all creation. But what is happening in this world? Now, we have so many creatures living on Earth. It's estimated to have around 8.7 million eukaryotic species living in our planet. And this is, eukaryotic are the kind of complex creatures, bacteria, and with both the mitochondria, etc., so more complex creatures. But the problem is that we are not even sure of, because we have not even discovered these things. So 86% of land species and 91% of the marine species actually remain undiscovered. So we are destroying the earth faster than we even discover. Now, I've just shown you, this was, many species. This was in Africa, but there were also many frogs and, new creatures discovered in India, in Western Ghats, near the places where you live, in, bordering Karnataka and Kerala and Tamil Nadu, in the Western Ghats, many new species. This is from the Lake Malawi. Hundreds of new species are being discovered each year, but we are destroying the earth faster than we are able to discover what is actually living in it. So as an example, I can tell you that the living soil, the soil is living. So a handful of soil actually has more than the total population of human beings on Earth. It has more creatures, small creatures, living in one handful of soil. So that is the population is currently 8 billion human beings. So there are so many creatures. But what is very important is when we don't care for the soil, the level of living creatures will go down. Because if we are not able to carefully do the agriculture, if we are putting too much of fertilizers, if we are putting, if we are not having mulch, if we are not having trees, if we are just allowing the rain to wash away the topsoil, and if we put too much of pesticides, fertilizers, and if we do only monoculture, the level of life within the soil will come down. It comes down. So, and it has taken millions upon millions of years to develop. And if we don't care for the soil, that will be destroyed. Now, this photograph is a very interesting, it is actually soil taken from 1.4 kilometers below the surface of Earth. 1.4 kilometers below the surface of Earth. Now, what is happening is that even below 1.4 kilometers, there is living creatures. These are actually worms seen, nematodes seen under the microscope from soil taken 1.4 kilometers. So obviously, these are not living because of any particular sunlight. There's no sunlight. It actually lives because of various other things. Could be because of magnetic radiation, could be energy drawn from certain chemical, sulfur or iron, etc. So life is present. The earth is teeming with life. That we have to understand. And then when you look at living people, we are 8 billion people now on Earth. But what has happened is that this population has shot up quite drastically over the last centuries. It took millions, hundreds of thousands of years for us to reach 1 billion. But over the last few hundreds of years, we have now shot up to now 8 billion. But the world population will actually stabilize at around 10 billion by the end of the century. So it is not as if we are too many people. There is enough and more of food, more of resources for us to live on Earth. But what is important is that we cannot live in such a way that we destroy the rest of the Earth. So the culprits actually are not the huge numbers of people. The culprits are the fewer people who are living a very unsustainable life. Now, I will just want a very interesting picture I want to show you is that, we think that we are very individual, very strong people. We can manage to live by ourselves. This is a very shocking truth that on an average, in each body, there are 30 trillion cells. 30 trillion cells. That is 30 followed by 12 zeros. But when you calculate it, they estimated that the number of organisms who are living in our body, that is inside our gut, inside our nose, on our skin, in our urinary canal, in our rectum, all put together, there are actually more number of microbial cells than the total number of cells in each person's body. So in a way, each person is a community, and when we live in a way that we are close with the earth, when we are then the kind of bacteria also will improve. Now, if you are living in a very sterile area where we are only, when we are not taking care of our environment, and if we don't have any pets, if we are always cleaning and always keeping everything clean and don't have any contact with soil, with animals, then we have problems, because 70% of the immune cells and all immunity is contributed is contributed by organisms living in our gut. So diabetes, weight loss, cancer, ability to combat infection, all are dependent on the creatures that live among us. So living a healthy lifestyle and eating for a varied type of food, and not just particular type or only highly refined food, will help us. But the problem is that we are actually not in balance with the world. Why is that? The example, what shows is that over the last 200 years, we have tremendously changed the world. We have tremendously changed the world because now we are producing a lot of carbon dioxide. We are utilizing a lot of carbon which was under the soil, because the energy for the earth was actually created for our works is created from hydrocarbons, petroleum, etc., non-renewable resources, but so burning wood, etc., burning coal, burning petroleum. So these carbon that was trapped in all these, they were actually fossils, creatures which died long ago, which has become carbonized. Now we are releasing them with a tremendous pace. So we are actually increasing the carbon dioxide level and the temperature of the earth. You can see this graph. So what is the problem, and what is the problem? The problem is we are actually changing the health of the planet. We are changing the health of the planet because the temperature increase, the last time such a rapid temperature increase took place was millions of years ago. But now what is happening, and that took place over a long thousands of years, but now within a few hundred years, we are tremendously increasing the temperature. So what is happening is we have many more of wildfires. We have so many things, like you would have read about, like even in the Bay of in the Arabian Sea, over the last 50 years, the number of cyclones, because of the warming sea, Arabian Sea, there were never used to be cyclones. It was always usually in the Bay of Bengal, but the number of cyclones have increased in the Arabian Sea. You look at what happened in Pakistan. In the first time in history, 60% of the whole country was underwater. Look at the 25 nations in Africa which are facing tremendous floods. Over the last 50 years, we have 5 times increase in natural disasters. There was a heat wave this year in Europe which killed thousands of people. Never in history has been so much of heat. So there is a lot of changes that are happening because of the increasing in the increased health of the planet. And what is other problem is the warming of the oceans means that the phyto and zooplankton, which is actually which gives food to the fish and to the animals and to the fish, are moving towards the cooler regions, towards the poles. So the fish stocks are collapsing. At the same time, we are also fishing, doing industrial fishing, like industrial agriculture, in a very unsustainable manner. So a lot of problems are there. And of course, why is this global greenhouse? Where is this global greenhouse gas being emitted? You can see 73% of it is because of energy use for industry, for transportation, and for heating buildings. But you can see about 20% is because of agriculture, forestry, and land use. And 3% is because of waste, and only 5% because of industry. So that is where we have to change. But when you talk about food, you can say nearly quarter, more than 30% of the food, the greenhouse gas emissions a quarter, not a quarter, a third of all greenhouse gas emissions are caused related to food. Food. And what is the importance of food when you say large proportions of land is used for food, for producing food? 40% of arable land is used to produce food. 70% of all the fresh water available on earth is used for food, producing food. But what is very shocking is 1/3 of all food in the world is wasted. Is wasted. So how is this food wasted? It's not only that you don't eat everything that you put on your plate. Sometimes it's also because of a lack of refrigeration, lack of transportation. So what is harvested is not stored and not able to store well, etc. So wastage of food. So we have to be aware that the food that we eat is actually contributing to a quarter of all the greenhouse gas emissions. It is utilizing 40% of the land. It is using 70% of all fresh water available. So what we have to understand that the food should never be wasted. We should share the food we have, and we have to consider food as a very, very precious gift from God. Now, what is happening, the food, there is a lot of problem with food. And what is very amazing is that 40% of the people in the world actually cannot afford healthy diets. There is 3.1 billion people. Can you imagine? And there is about 1 in 9 people are actually starving. 828 million are affected by very severe hunger. When you say 40% of the people are not able to afford healthy diets, they are not starving, but they are not living healthy in a healthy manner. And the situation is that there are nearly 100 million people, 1 in 78 people are actually on earth are actually now on the move. So there's a war in Ukraine has actually made matters worse. So now food prices are very high and all these dramatic, and we are actually, there is a universal consensus among economists that we are going into a global recession in 2023. So we are actually in a very, very challenging times. And of course, this is just for you to show how the climate change, in fact, is impacting the health of human beings. Increasing CO2 levels, rising temperatures, more extreme weather, rising sea level. So, it is having a lot of impacts on our health. Apart from the food itself is becoming more difficult to get, because we are having more infrequent rains. We are becoming more dependent on using fertilizers. We are now having more. See, for example, when you look at the diseases like COVID and Ebola, all these are infections that have jumped from animals. It was actually in animals because of deforestation, because we are encroaching into the animal kingdom, because we are using animals and abusing animals and different things, and animals themselves are moving out, and we are interacting. There are now ice is melting, and the new studies also are showing that millions upon millions of organisms that were frozen are also coming out. So there are a lot of challenges now. So I've given some more of impacts about the key facts and impact of climate change on health. Now, why are we so it is really impacting health in a very serious way. But we just concluded the COP summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. You find that countries who are producing oil watered down the text, and the commitment is not there. But of course, there was a new fund called loss and damage. That is, many of the poor countries they don't have the impact of climate change is already here. I mentioned about Pakistan. I mentioned about, you can think about Bangladesh. You can think about the parts of India that are struggling with huge drought, etc. Now so the impact is already there. So now the international community, the countries are saying we need money assistance. So that is a very important thing. But what is for us to understand that if you look at the water table of the country of India, water table of India, it is dramatically coming down. And if you look at a long-term study shown in of the photographs, they studied the series over 40 years, the satellite pictures of the Himalayan mountains, the Pamir Knot, all the mountains in Central Asia, from photographs of the spy satellites of America. So when they deregulated it, over 40 years of footage every year, they analyzed the photos and they found that the ice layer is thinning and thinning and thinning. And of course, for us to know that the Himalayan plateau and the Pamir Knot in Central Asia supplies to more than half of humanity. This is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Indochina, China. So you have so many countries who are depending on these ice. So we are going into some serious problems now. And also, what is also important to understand is we are not only increasing the temperature, but we are also destroying a lot of our creatures. We are destroying the environment. We are actually, over the last 40 years, we have contributed to the decline of nearly 70% of all global vertebrate species, 70%. So, and this is the rate over the last 200 years of the rates of extinctions of amphibians, mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish. So we have lots of work to do. Now, this is the sea level rise. I was talking about warming oceans. I already mentioned to you. It is, so you have in the temperatures. You can the sea height variation is what is shown here, and of course the health of people, hunger, displacement, migration, conflicts. You see what is happening in the conflict situations in just one country. Conflicts in a faraway European country is impacting the costs of food all over the world. So, but the impact of conflict in Myanmar, the impact of conflicts in Sri Lanka, all these issues, you cannot contain them. It will impact even the neighboring countries. And the health of people are impacted because of pesticides, because of deforestation. All these are issues that we have to understand. The huge, so it is just, of course, it sounds like terrible news, but I'm just updating you on these issues. There was this, the huge locust outbreak in the end of last year and the beginning of 2020 in East Africa. Desert locusts, they spread throughout. They came up to Pakistan, went in the Arabian Peninsula. It was again because of unseasonal rains and heat. Health, there's this pollution, etc., increasing, and the challenges that people face. Now, these challenges are also not only creating problems for the health, but it is also producing mental health issues. Now look at when we have an earthquake, when we have floods, when we lose our house, it increases waterborne diseases, increases injuries, but it gives us a lot of challenges of mental health. Now the churches are doing a lot of work. even when you say the churches in India are doing a lot of work to climate, working on climate justice, and you will hear from other speakers and you'll know what is happening. This is a very, very dynamic area of work which we are doing. And of course, the Church of South India is doing a lot of work in green church, green schools, green churches, green protocol, and the CSI, the department, the synodical board focusing on ecological work has been doing tremendous work over the last many years. But we have to understand that the challenge is huge, and we need to redouble our efforts to preserve the planet, preserve not only people, but also preserve the health of the planet, preserve the health of people and health of the person. Now, this is called a Earth Overshoot Day. That means the rate of consumption of global footprint and the amount of resources used. One planet is not enough. So especially the wealthier countries use much more resources than that are available. Now you can see now the rate of consumption of resources, we need 1.7 Earths. So it's called the Earth Overshoot Day, the day in which we have overshot using one. You can see during COVID that because of the less activities, that day was actually pushed forward. So we have to find ways, especially challenging the resource-rich countries who are utilizing tremendous amount of resources. But we cannot use the same challenge to poorer communities who are hardly contributing any greenhouse gases. But they still have not, many poorer communities do not have the basic necessities, electricity, food, or facilities of transportation. So when we say reduction of resources, we cannot just blame or put the responsibility as to everybody uniformly. It is very important for us to understand that the resource-rich countries have to take more responsibility. Here's a picture which I had, drawn. That that Adam and Eve. I don't know whether you can make out Adam and Eve. This is Adam, as a man, and this is a woman. We are actually eating up the whole earth, and we are consuming the earth. We are destroying the earth actually. But here it shows the responsibility, how the responsibility is spread. So you can see the amount of resources that is being used, the emissions. This is the burden of emissions. East Asia and Pacific is so much. Europe and Central Asia is so much. United States, one country, is so much, which is about 3 times the whole of South Asia. But, we have to, the greenhouse emissions, but unless we actually reduce the greenhouse gases, here you are seeing, unless we reduce it, we cannot keep the temperature low. Keeping the temperature to increase up to 1.5 is essential for us to have a living planet. So these coming years are extremely important, especially now, Indian population by next year will increase more than the Chinese population. But the point is that it's not that we will be in, and now you remember 20 years ago, if you had been in Delhi or any other city, very few people had air conditioners. Now, wealthier people are becoming wealthier. There are more air conditioners. We are consuming more energy. Now, the point is, how do we consume more renewable energy? How do we make sure there's more more solar panels, that we have more renewable sources of energy? It's very important because if we allow the greenhouse gas emissions to continue, then without any policies, the temperature will rise high and we will be very much in bad shape, especially the coming generations. I am, so for example, I am 59 years old. I may not see this tremendous, terrible situation. But imagine your children and your grandchildren. Imagine a child that is growing up, who will live to see the end of the century. Imagine if we have not taken responsibility And if we don't, so the people on earth today have a huge responsibility in caring for the climate and planet. And so one of the key things is, about, we mentioned that 40% of land is being used for food, 70% of water is being used for food. We need more ecological methods of cultivation. We have to use more, natural methods, that is intercropping. We cannot just have monocultures. Only one culture, one estate, one only rice, only rubber plantations, only palm oil plantations. What happens is there you have very, very much, we have to put much more fertilizers and pesticides. Why? Because when you have intercropping, when you have cultivation of different things nearby, like a row of marigold, a row of marigold flowers, a row of onions, we have alternated, then you will see that you will need less pesticides. You will have to have mixed. We need trees in between paddy fields. We need to have very intelligent way of cultivation, because if we do in that natural way, in a mixed method, then we will need less pesticides and less fertilizers. And we need to use more mulching. We need to use more natural methods of fertilizer, because what is happening now, people are just pumping in huge amounts of fertilizers, and this cannot be absorbed in the earth, and this water is washed off, and there is algae blooming in the rivers and lakes, and it's killing life on the rivers. And of course, who is making money out of this? This is because a lot of subsidy is given for fertilizers and pesticides. And where do these fertilizers and pesticides come from? They come from hydrocarbons, petroleum industry. And who makes them? Very wealthy companies. And so for farmers, you having to use more and more pesticides, more and more fertilizers, spending more money and taking loans and not being able to pay back the loans, they are killing themselves. India has one of the largest rates of suicides among farmers. The farmers are finding it more and more difficult. Imagine 100 kilos of rice, how much it costs today, how much was it costing 10 years ago? There's not much of a difference. But imagine if you're a teacher 10 years ago, what was your salary? What's your salary now? So the purchasing capacity and the incomes of farmers have not risen. So there's a lot of policy issues, and the subsidies that people give are mostly feeding the rich and mostly feeding the petrochemical, indirectly, industries. So now we have developed something called the 10 Commandments of food. And that's very important. And what we have to understand is that, that we have to give thanks for the food we eat. We need to grow food as closely as possible where you live. So for example, you don't have to necessarily buy palm oil that is grown in Indonesia. You can take coconut oil that's grown in your own place, or groundnut oil, or gingerly oil, which is used in your own culture. Because the idea that you need to only take palm oil, or you need to only take sunflower oil, or you should not take coconut oil, all these things are highly contested. The importance is that we don't take too much of oil. Whatever we take, we should take in moderation, and try to buy things from your own local markets, so that the people around you, the farmers who live around you, will be able to live. And then it is important that we strive for all people to have knowledge about and access to affordable and sufficient food. We need to eat mindfully and in moderation. We don't need to eat as much as we usually eat. We don't need to eat 3 or 4 or 5 times. We can reduce the amount of food that we eat. We can eat according to our needs. We need to really reflect, and we should not waste food. I told you 1/3 of food is wasted in the world. It is a very precious thing. Unfortunately, food has become a commodity, and you have to understand that it is not just a commodity, it's a gift of God. We have to be grateful to those who grow and prepare food. It's important. Who's cooking food? Is it, we need, as men, we need to spend more time to support in doing these things, because a lot of these things are done by women, and there's a lot of gender inequity. We need to support fair wages for farm workers and fisher folk and food workers. We need to reduce the environmental damage of water, etc. We need to protect the biodiversity of seeds and soils and ecosystems and the cultures of food producers, because we need different types of rice. We should not just buy one type of, and also it's not only rice, because our ancestors were not eating rice and wheat only. They were eating ragi, they were eating different kinds of millets, sorghums, and javra and jowar. And so what we need to take that, because those millets are in many times even more nutritious. Ragi and jowar and all are very, very rich. We have to introduce them back into our diets. And of course, we need to protect the biodiversity. We should not just believe that every cow has to be fertilized with a jersey. And so we need to preserve some of our different species, because they are resilient species who can live and sustain. We need to rejoice and share the gift of life. Now, I just wanted to, say that we should follow the example of Jesus and thank God for providing our daily sustenance, and that we should acknowledge that all things come from God, and we recognize God as a source of all. And praying before the meals help us to remind us that truth. And you should understand that that even one of the commandments is to. I just wanted to also to say. Can you see my face now? Have you stopped the? Yeah. What the idea is that we should understand that the Earth as a planet is an integral thing. I try to tell you that you have now one person's body has got 39 trillion cells, 30 trillion cells, 30 followed by 12 zeros. But we ourselves have 39 trillion cells creatures living in us. We are not independent. We are not a rock. We are not an island. We need each other. We need the creatures that live around with us. You see, as I remembered, one handful of Earth has more creatures than the total population of the Earth. But what happens when we destroy the environment is that we make this planet less livable. And what happens if you make this planet less livable? That means if we live in a very selfish way, then we are not allowing our people and our children and our grandchildren to enjoy this planet. And it's a very significant thing, because, we have to look back. How many thousands of years ago did we actually start agriculture? We started agriculture only. Can anybody say in the chat box maybe? How many thousands of years did human beings start doing agriculture? That means from the Garden of Eden, when did Cain and Abel come out? That means from hunter-gatherer, 12,000. Fantastic. So that's exactly 12,000 to 10,000 to 12,000 years ago is when we started to domesticate animals and domesticate different species. And what is so amazing is that by that time, the whole Earth was populated by human beings. Human beings left human beings. There were different species of human beings. And it's not only Homo sapiens. There were other types, close relatives. But Homo sapiens were the most successful. And they left the African continent only around 100 to 150,000 years ago. And they spread all over the earth. And when you look at the people who started to cultivate, you see they found things all over the world. So it was not that just in the Middle East they started cultivating. You will find in Papua New Guinea, they domesticated bananas. You'll see that in India they domesticated buffaloes, and the wild cock into hens. You see that in Latin America they domesticated maize and tomatoes, and cotton was simultaneously domesticated both in Latin America and also in Asia. Rice was domesticated in China. So it points to you that every person in the world have the same potential. It's not as if one group of people discovered everything. And so the civilization grew. And we are 12,000 years is a twinkle of an eye. And what the changes we are doing to the earth is only 200, 300 years. So we have to look into our own life and reflect, how can we make sure that all people can actually live dignified lives? We can, but by not destroying the earth. So it's a complex issue. So I have a few biblical concepts. One is, first of all, we have to know what is happening. That is very important. We have to be connected with each other. We need to feel that we are not by ourselves, because Jesus said, or reminded us, we are one body. So if we are one body, you can't say, if one hand is in water and the other hand is in fire, on an average, I am keeping fine. No, we are not fine. So if one person in Kashmir is suffering, we also should suffer. Or one person in Kanyakumari suffers, we will suffer as. So as humanity, nothing, it's not divisible. Climate change is not, you cannot, so I'm living in Switzerland and they think that it's one of the richest countries. But do you think that Switzerland will be spared? By the end of the century, there won't be any glaciers. There won't be any snow, actually. Do you think that when people have less money, nobody will come here? So everybody will become poor. So it is, and carbon dioxide will go everywhere. When the sea level rises, it rises both in Sydney, in Mumbai, and in Florida. So it's a great leveler. So we are in together. So, and we have to commit, as the Bible teaches us, we have to work for each other. We have a commitment to know what is happening, because Jesus, in the story of the fig, he said, fig tree, when there are shoots, spring is coming. He wants us to understand what's happening to the earth. He wants us to be knowledgeable, and we have to discern, and we have to be interconnected, and we have to advocate and care for each other, as Jesus taught us. We have to care for each other. We have to care for the earth. So it's very biblical, but I will conclude now. And if we have some time, you can ask some questions and we can have some interactions.